Welcome back, everyone, to one more panel discussion in this series in our online conference, part of the hackathon we're doing for the EU-Africa, the post-crisis journey. It is my pleasure today to talk about a topic that is very close to my heart. We're going to be discussing during this next hour about e-governance, and we have assembled a tremendous panel to talk to you about this topic with experts from both Europe and Africa. So allow me first to introduce you. Who do we have here today? We have Nadege Nzeyama. She's a communications officer at Transparency Rwanda International. We have Sara Birete. She's the executive director of the Center for Constitutional Governance in Uganda. We have Siko Mzomi, who's the co-founder at Code Africa in South Africa. And we have our very own Sim Sikut. He's the government CIO for the Republic of Estonia and a long-time Garage 48 fan. So before we begin with the actual discussion, I'd like to also give a bit of context to the people watching at home about the panelists we have and some of the backgrounds that they bring to the discussion. So Nadege, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you do.
Thank you very much for having me. As you said, my name is Nadege Nzeyimana, and I've been working for this past decade in good governance areas. I worked with the Office of the Ombudsman of Rwanda, and later I joined Transparency International Rwanda. And also in between, I went to study in Estonia at Estonia School of Diplomacy, where also I got a chance to come close and see how the e-governance, when it's put into practice, it really affects people's lives and every sector of the development. And when I was in Estonia, I also joined Estonian e-governance academy as an intern, where I also developed again another interest because I've seen how really the digital society works. And I wished that also for the African continent, especially also for my country, which is Rwanda. And now also I'm a consultant at Future States with their project. It's an initiative they are working on to develop a Africa Data Leadership Initiative. It's a peer learning network and exchange just to around data for the African policymakers. It's another initiative. They are working together with Smart Africa and the United Nations Economic for Africa. Basically, that's my background related to this particular topic we are discussing today. Thank you so much.
Super. Welcome to the panel. Siko, let's go to you. Siko, I don't know if you're muted. Siko, can you hear us? I think we're having a few technical issues. Maybe Sara, let's go to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm glad to be part of this panel. I'm called Sara Birete, a lawyer by profession. I'm an advocate of High Court of Uganda. I am a practitioner in terms of governance. I am a human rights activist, land rights activist, women activist, and the executive director of the Center for Constitutional Governance, a body that is a constitutional watchdog in Uganda, working on both active citizenry, citizens' participation, and policy reforms, policy and legal reforms, and constitutional reforms at a national level. I have spent a decade in this sphere. Before that, I worked with the International Conference on the Great Lakes region as a coordinator and a government expert coordinating the process in the Great Lakes region, and also influencing legal and policy reforms at the regional level. I am a founder of the Center for Constitutional Governance, but I worked 8 years as a director of programs, and this is my second year as the executive director of the Center for Constitutional Governance. Glad to be with you.
Welcome to the panel. And I think Siko is not yet with us. So let's go to Sim Sikut. We can't talk about e-governance without talking about Estonia. So Sim, a little bit about your background.
Thank you, Joao. And indeed, first of all, as you said, been a long time fan for Garage 48, as you can sort of see, right? We've been doing some gigs and events with Garage 48 crew also in Estonia to basically, hack up how we do digital government here and bring the sort of private makers and builders together with the government more and more. Look, but long story short, yes. So with our team in government CIO office of Estonia here, our job is to steer how our public sector makes the most of digital opportunities and basically continues to taking it to the next level like that. So the journey never ends in that sense. And in our setup, exactly, we have a coordination role. So, we have to set the strategy. We also have to, of course, make the machinery of government work in the direction of that strategy. So yeah, that's the job. But beyond that, I've had the honor and sort of luck and luxury to also work a bit on or think a bit of digital governance issues in Africa. I was the member of the high-level panel between European Union and African Union on digital economy, or a task force on digital economy. So we were exactly thinking about how can we channel some of the digital governance experience all the way to that great continent of Africa.
Super, great to have you on the panel, Siim. Let's just double check if Siko has joined or not to give him a chance to do an intro, but I think he hasn't. We're trying to connect to Siko throughout the panel. But I'd like to put it to you as a first question. What's the current status when it comes to e-governance across Africa? Obviously, the story might be quite different when it comes to Estonia and all the services that we already have developed here. But I'm very curious to know what's the current situation like in Africa. Nadej, maybe we start with you.
Thank you very much. I think for Africa as a continent, it's also big with 54 countries. Of course, when we want to talk to Africa and to put it into categories, it's easier when we talk by regions. When you say like Rwanda, we're in East Africa, we have North Africa, all those have West Africa, all those have different regional organizations. And as an e-governance process, it's a bit of a complex process, which we may not find at which level really Africa is at this moment. Since we have some African countries which are a very advanced level, others really coming up, and other we have which has not yet done anything. But again, there are very good also process which are being implemented, but when there are also challenges. I would say when we talk about e-governance, that means that we need internet. And also in Africa, we still have a very low level of penetration of internet, which also can hinder the process of putting up e-government. But again, we still have some countries which don't have identification, be any ID or electronic ID. This is also something which we still have challenges that need to be addressed. But also I can also recommend some of the local solutions Africans are doing, since we still have this also digital skills gap, and also it's hard to implement e-government services. But we've seen some very best practices, I would say again, in Rwanda or in other countries, where they are trying to put up one-stop centers. These are really limiting the challenge of the digital penetration, because the one-stop center, what it does, it's just a center which is set up somewhere in a remote area or in a rural area, and where they can provide all government services online. So if a citizen is really not, can't use any digital device, they have a center where they can get help, but still access e-government services. This is a very best practice. I think it can be emulated around Africa, but also in Africa, we still have we still at least have a mobile penetration which is on the rise. So again, this is something some countries are really taking advantage of by trying to use these mobile devices which are used by different population, also to try so they can access the government services by using USSD, by also trying also to access different government services. Of course, when we talk about mobile, it's again easier because a mobile phone can be shared with the whole family. It can even be shared with another household different from the owner. So I won't say e-governance in Africa, it really has reached a very high level. But again, it's hard to talk at the level of e-governance in Africa as one, because there are already efforts at country level, efforts on region, and as a continent. But yes, we need to have also some harmonization so we can make sure that we are moving as one instead of having one country being advanced. So thank you
Nadej,
so
in that
much.
sense, I think Rwanda is actually one of the leading countries, right?
Yes, Rwanda is one of us, the African countries, when it comes to really advanced technological solutions in government. Yeah, we have this government portal. It's called Irembo. It's one of portal where you can find all government services at one, and it's connected with the payment. And again, you can pay with mobile phone or bank. But most of the times we use a lot of a lot of time mobile applications. And again, it's connected also with the government offices, so it's easier. Just with one click, you have already applied for for example, I want one paper, I can just apply it and then wait in the time frame on which the service is delivered. If that paper is supposed to be delivered in 2 days, then you know that in 2 days you get that. I think also this comes with another, it improves service delivery, and it reduces the long journey that we normally used to go to the institution and go back again to apply and go back to pick up the certificate on any other government paper.
Thank you. Sarah, what's the situation like in Uganda? And does it make sense to talk about e-governance when I think it's a large percentage of the economy is still on the informal side of the economy? Where does that come into play?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think broadly, starting with Africa in general, Africa's access to internet, I think, is at 20% as compared to Europe, which is at 80%. And this is per UN 2080 report on e-governance. But when it comes to Uganda in general, and I agree that Rwanda is ahead. I think it's one of the fastest countries in terms of technology advancement. Uganda's access to internet is at 41%. But also we need to underscore the fact that in order for the population to access internet, they need first of all access electricity, they need to have the necessary skills, they need to afford the cost of internet. So given the three limitations, which are very present especially in the rural setup in Uganda, we have challenges with administering e-governance. We have services, yes, the Uganda government has moved. I think 40% of service delivery is found on e-platforms, including paying taxes, including land management systems, digital banking. We have now e-parliament, partial e-parliament because of COVID. We have digital passports. But accessibility to these services are still limited to the 41% that can access internet in Uganda. So you have the 59% that is excluded out of e-services. And then as clearly highlighted, we still have a lot of people involved in informal sector, especially when it comes to the economy. We have people that are not knowledgeable to pay their taxes on internet, even if they can afford. We have people that are not knowledgeable on how to use internet, especially the market women, the people involved in agriculture. And this is the digital divide that we are fighting with in Uganda, and I think Uganda is not addressing these challenges in isolation. We still have many more countries that still have lower levels of internet capacity and outreach as compared to Uganda. We also have competing governance priorities that we are grappling with as a nation, which takes away the concentration of innovation and modern digitalization of our governance as a country. We are still grappling with the challenges of poverty, the need to build infrastructure, including internet. The cable network for internet access in the country is very limited, which also makes internet very expensive. We are still one of the highly corrupt countries, and we need to address this challenge as well. So e-governance is normally outcompeted by these other governance competing priorities in a nation. But on a continent as a whole, we need to underscore the fact that so far 6 countries, Rwanda inclusive, have reasonable e-know-how amongst the population. But on a scale of 55 countries, our ratio of e-know-how is at 0.3433 in Africa as compared to 0.7727 in Europe. And this is a very big digital divide that we need to address as a continent.
Yeah, I think you bring here, Sarah, a lot of good points. And of course, you can't have e-governance without first having governance. So that's a very important notion. And I think, in their opening speeches, the head of Smart Africa was talking about making sure that access to internet is one of their priorities. Lowering the cost, the affordability to access internet is one of their priorities. And Siim, to put it to you, in her opening words, the president of Estonia was talking about how you need to have the foundations of access to internet being sort of universal to be able to lay the foundations to start the journey towards e-governance. Obviously, we're talking of very different realities here, but tell us a little bit about the background of the Estonian adventure and maybe some learning, some pitfalls that can be shared with some countries that are now starting their journey towards e-governance.
Well, if you look back to Estonia about 20-25 years ago, when we started going digital in sort of faster pace like that, it was a time when internet was just taking off, mind you, right? So it was quite a different context. We had to sort of learn a lot of things by doing, essentially. But I think what the president must have meant is that, even if these conditions are not there initially, in a way you can build them up in parallel. So when we started in Estonia, it also was not the case that internet was everywhere, and not everyone by far did not have digital skills or digital literacy to be part of the digital society yet. But what we realized is exactly that these things have to move hand in hand. So our strategy has always been, we build up the services, at the same time we invest into people, the skills, the awareness in the wider economy for people to benefit from the services. And third part also, that obviously we had to keep investing into connectivity. And we still have to do that. So even these days in Estonia, there are parts where the speeds are quite uneven, right? Our issue is not that much internet access as such, but the speed of it in some places. We are a very remote country in places. But my point being that, there are many sort of parts of the puzzle that have to move in advance, and that's the hard part of the policy. But still, what I'm trying to say is that, in some ways, I would urge at least everyone in Africa to think about this way, that in some ways you are even a better spot when we started, because there's so much more lessons, experience, technology, also even for that matter, the skills and even access to start from than we had back in the day. And hopefully that's a bit of encouragement. So just basically the critical mass, it seems in several countries, at least in Africa, seems to be there. I'm quite with Nadej that obviously it's very diverse in Africa. We can't really sort of bundle it together, but if we somehow have to generalize, then I'm always an optimist. So basically I see that there's enough space and like nucleus to build from. But long story short, I think in Estonia our luck has been we have tried to always figure out ways how to do a lot with little. And I also hope that that sort of experience sort of resonates a bit in a sense that we rarely invent the technology. We rather have been tried to be very good in terms of fast and thorough uptake of this, and build on the existing technology from the wide world. We also obviously have had to find out ways how to optimize in terms of the investments we make into digital government and even connectivity. So that's why, for example, we have been so strong in the use of platforms when it comes to digital government. Identity, nationwide digital identity, was born because of the need that we just also could not afford, talent-wise, money-wise, to do it a few times over in private sector and government and so on. We had to pull the resources together. That was a way to optimize. And the platform thinking then, besides also optimizing on the investment, it also meant that now digitization in different sectors, in different parts of government, so on, was also much faster because there was less need to rebuild those same tools again. So if, next ministry wanted to start offering their services digitally, or the, next company, even whatever movie theater, or the next sort of, farmer selling their stuff on, selling their produce online, they didn't have to figure out, okay, how do I do this authentication of the users now? They just took the national platform and worked from this. It basically made going digital so much cheaper, faster, better, more resilient and secure for everyone across the board. So platform approach has been very fundamental to us. But my last point is obviously I echo what has been spoken here and what the president said, that in the end, a lot of it boils down to that if the wider sort of governance is there, a lot of the challenge with building a digital government is not technology. It's about how do we choose to use technology? Do we have the sort of enabling legal framework for that? Do we have the right sort of organizational setup to be fast enough and thorough enough in terms of how we build up technology? And a lot of it has to be experimentation also. Is our governance set for experimentation? Can we afford and are we okay to take a few risks? Because in the end, you have to try things out without knowing if they will work. So a lot of this sort of cultural, organizational, legal sort of background is what needs to be built up in parallel to the actual technological uptake.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and starting this journey back when also the internet was kicking off is a good parallel, perhaps with what might be happening nowadays in Africa. And in certain sense, I think I remember when I came to Estonia, I saw that Estonia was leapfrogging a lot of technology that was ancient and didn't make sense. And I think one question that I'd like to put to you and to all the panelists is, e-governance is also a tool to bring the power distance or the distance between citizens and their institutions, the governments, a little bit closer. In countries that are very wide, very rural, as they are in Africa, you cannot expect to have a government office everywhere. But nowadays, with mobile networks, you can pretty much reach those remote regions in a way that wasn't available before. So my question to you and to all the panel is, does e-governance bring citizens closer to government? Does it increase the level of transparency, of feeling of the institutions being closer? And does it also bring some of the parallel economy or the non-declared economy closer to the regulated economy? And perhaps now is a good time to bring in Siko. I don't know if you listened to the question that I posed, but perhaps we can start with you. How do you see this sort of power distance between citizens and their governmental institutions, and how does e-governance play a role there?
Thank you, Joao, and apologies for that. I think this is just testament enough of the many challenges that we face on this continent, and one of those being reliable connectivity. I think one of the takeaways, before I answer your question, which I'm pretty excited about, takeaway from this conference is really a new partnership that we've formed. And it's really great to be a part of it and lead in the decision-making process of the Pledged Initiative. And I can possibly share this now that we're working to co-create with our partners that we've met during this conference. And it's an innovation impact fund which is about $100 million worth of impact investment solutions that will work with Africans in the diaspora, government agencies across the African continent, and EU partners to respond to the challenges that I think most of the panelists have highlighted. And one of those is, of course, access and infrastructure and the human capital value creation. And I think when you talk about the distance or the gap that exists, I think the partial or total failure of e-governance projects in Africa is purely due to largely the large gaps that often exist between project design and the African public sector reality. And I think this arises from a Western supply-driven animus that fails to take into account African realities. And this obviously then exacerbates the gap that you're highlighting. And I think earlier during the week when we're having that discussion about the various gaps or the economies that exist, you have the informal and you've got the formal economy. And they all make one economy, but they all have their different characteristics. So how do we bridge the gap in making sure that both economies, this informal rural economy that you speak of, has got the same access, has got the similar opportunities that the formal sector has. And I think I'll attribute the Western focus of African e-governance efforts most probably to international donor agencies, presumably international consultants as well. I think we often bring with them the if it works for us, it'll work for you mentality. And of course, the Western trained African civil servants or consultants. So I think among other reasons for the failure of these projects and the gap that keeps widening is probably due to the fact of project goals being too ambitious and that are just given the production capacity. And another is the efforts that are often directed at supporting instead of redesigning dysfunctional processes. So I think there's a lot that still needs to be done. And I think Sim touched on that, where there's ignoring of cultural elements in project delivery strategies. And I think that's one aspect where citizens really feel that they're being not done for. They're not being listened to because primarily government leads in this process, but there is no civil participation. There is no, at one point, where the civilians or citizens are given the opportunity to make recommendations or to be part of the process. It's usually a top-down approach. And I think most of us who are activists and active citizens, our approach is more about a ground-up approach where there is recognition in the value of everyone in a participatory exercise to make sure that every voice is heard. And I think this is where the gap then lies. And the distrust
is there a demand for this?
Is then created.
Siko, which then really begs the question, is there a demand from citizens for these types of services? And I don't mean just for e-governance, but is there a demand from citizens to these types of approaches? Because if it is a top-down approach, if it is something that we've seen in working Europe, if we've seen it work in Estonia, then let's bring it down to our countries. If that has failed, so where's the demand coming from? And I mean this for the panel, so I don't know who wants to take this on.
Look, I think there is demand, and comparatively speaking, if we look at the e-readiness of African regions, I think the data tells us that in Southern Africa, South Africa and Lesotho lead. You've got in Northern Africa, Egypt and Libya lead. Eastern Africa, you've got Mauritius, Seychelles, Kenya. Central Africa, you've got Angola and Gabon, Cabo Verde, which we spoke about earlier during the week. They're leading. Nigeria, Ghana. So there is an appetite. There is interest. People do want to get engaged. Citizens are demanding to be connected. And I think the disconnect really is about establishing the trust and communicating the benefits of e-governance. Because remember, e-governance is multi-sectoral. It goes through into any aspect of technology. So irrespective of industry or sector, I think there needs to be more an approach that seeks to raise more awareness to the benefits of e-governance.
Absolutely, and I think that that's something, Nadej, if we can bring it to the discussion. Siko was talking about the trust aspect. So I want to hear from the Rwandan side, where these initiatives, where did the demand come from, and how does transparency play a role there? How does the trust factor between governmental institutions and implementing some of these e-governance solutions, how does that play a role?
Thank you very much. I think I would just first talk about governance just as a standalone without saying e-governance before go to the e-governance. In Rwanda, there is already the inclusiveness when it comes to involve citizens. They are like now, of course, now it's very, very hard because of COVID restrictions, but normally they involve citizens into from when they start, they involve them in implementation, in evaluation, and also in the planning. But this is something which also have been raised through the advocacy, just showing that most of the time citizens were just being informed about the activities, but not being involved first to know what they want. So there have been consultations now with what Rwanda has as one of homegrown solution, which is called Imihigo. It's something which goes back before the colonial period, where people used to sit together and just talk about and plan ahead. So we have what we call Imihigo. It's just a planning process we use. And from the household to the national level, everyone has to plan. So now with the government and national level plans in Imihigo, citizens are involved from the very planning phase. But now when we bring it to the e-governance, we need to make sure that we create these platforms that digitally citizens can really participate and start from the planning phase. But also we need to make sure that apart from this process till the evaluation phase, they need also to access some data. They need to access budget. They need to access budget and other plans. Because what we've seen, it's a trend now, it's coming up. Now citizens are being empowered. Now they can hold the government accountable and ask why you didn't. So this was the plan, this is the budget. Why at the end of the day you couldn't deliver? So coming from the citizen, this is something we want. But as we say, I think also Sarah said something very interesting. We can't just say only e-governance. You have first to just make sure that we have systems in place. Then we make those systems digital. And also,
Sarah,
I think
Sarah had a very good point as well about, is there a will? Is there a will from governments to implement this? Because it does open up the doors. It does make things more transparent. You do see how the processes are made. You do see how they are following through with their activities. So, is there also a will from governments to be more transparent?
Yeah, I think you're very right. If we don't have already as we say, we can even have very designed laws, you can have very designed systems and institutions, but if there's no political will, it doesn't function. It doesn't work at all. We just have papers and everything ready, but with no operationalization of that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Sarah, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, governance has improved timely communication and feedback between citizens and the duty bearers, the government. And it has also increased the participation of citizens in their governance. We have programs on social media like Ask Your President, Ask Your Speaker of Parliament, Ask the Prime Minister, which, you know, an opportunity that would not exist for an ordinary citizen using Facebook or Twitter to directly engage with their leaders and be able to express their wishes, you know, values and aspirations, as well as expectations from their leaders, and hold them accountable. So yes, there is a demand for transparency, inclusion, participation, and accountability, as well as effective interaction and feedback from the citizens. But what is the commitment of the leadership, especially in countries where we are struggling with the legitimacy of leaders that are really not accountable, connected to the people, like the case is in my situation. So in our, you know, we need to look at governance as a whole, like my co-panelists have said, because you cannot digitalize dictatorship. In Uganda, we have many agencies that are attempting to be digital, but what are they digitalizing? Are they digitalizing governance or dictatorship? I see my sister laughing. But these are the real day-to-day challenges that we are dealing with as Ugandans. You know, for example, we are engaged in an election. We have e-technology in voting. We have systems incorporated right from Parliament to enable the use of technology in our elections. But what is the process towards the elections? Just last month, we have, you know, violence leading to 68 deaths on the streets of Kampala. We have a lot of, you know, a lot of challenges at the governance level, and digital innovation or revolution ceases to be our immediate challenge. We are dealing with matters of death, brutality. I'm sure people who have, you know, looked for Uganda online, you will find hashtags like Uganda is bleeding. For example, the NGO sector, they have closed accounts of several organizations engaged in election observation. So we have these enormous challenges of governance that we are confronted with as a people, and the digitalization ceases to be the immediate need. The immediate need is legitimacy. The immediate need is, you know, democracy, the will of the people to prevail. Then we can sit and concentrate on modern digitalization of that governance that has legitimacy and endorsement of the people. So the challenges are enormous. But yes, I want also to underscore the fact that social media has enabled many governments to change dictatorships and democratize. So technology is the latest weapon for increasing governance, even to a regime that would hardly be accountable to the people. In Uganda, when you have something that is trending on social media, it forces the government to react. But if it was not trending, the government would ordinarily ignore the people. So yes, even regimes that have no commitment to transparency and accountability are forced to respond to what is trending on social media.
Absolutely. I think the key word here that you underscore is about accountability, right? So I think whether with e-governance tools or social media, I think accountability is the key word. Seem, I want to direct the discussion to you, because Siko before talked about how e-governance has a problem of you know, positioning itself and advertising itself as a tool that empowers and enables certain services for citizens. They don't see the benefits. So, you know, from Estonia, you've been doing this for such a long time. You have a good experience about what types of services, what doors does e-governance really open to citizens. Many of them are not so obvious. So perhaps talk from that perspective about you know, giving a little bit of a positive light on e-governance as well.
Fair enough. And actually, my thought was to say that, look, we've been focused a lot on governance, and for good reasons, how digital tools can enable sort of democratic development and so on. But there is another dimension which is sort of, let's say, not the other side of the coin, but still a bit sort of different, which is about sort of digital tools can help the government to deliver better services, which is just as important as well. Because fundamentally, in many ways, in most of our countries, there are things that people don't get by just by themselves or just by the help of the private sector necessarily. And sort of, what we have seen is that sort of if a government is able to deliver more and better, also trust and sort of other sort of good spillovers can come from that obviously as well. And usually what we also see is that the government that starts delivering better also tends to become more accountable as such as well, because the loop of sort of interaction and sort of positive circle is being created. Now, but one more thing. So I quite hear that there's been a lot of, let's say, unmet promise on digital governance around the world. And I think in that sense, why the Estonian journey has sort of attracted a bit of attention, because our luck has been that we've been able to still build out things that bring value to people daily. Okay. So, and whether it's basically getting rid of the bureaucracy that involves in terms of interacting with the government when people really need to get things done. It's especially important for, obviously in the whole wide field of economy, where usually things encounters with the government are part of red tape that basically hinders business development. So if we can ease these things and make them better through less friction in the tax system, less friction in sort of all the sort of licensing and whatever is involved in terms of setting up a company, running a company, and so forth. Awesome. These are some of the great benefits we have seen here, for example. Another sort of angle, clearly, what has sort of been quite a bit of help in Estonia is everything in health, which tends to be a sort of public, at least publicly financed sort of sector in the wider government and economy. Again, with digital tools, we've been able to sort of make sure that sort of more treatment is delivered for faster and better for the people around the country, literally. So my point being that there's the whole sort of service angle and making government deliver better in terms of services that we shouldn't forget about, and that in some ways is just as important. Now, the service side of things, Joao, you asked also about, let's say, what is a demand? What we have seen, and not just, I don't speak just from Estonia, what I've seen from talking to colleagues widely all over the world is that a lot of it comes down to how you build those services. Do you design them? How do you design them? How do you basically improve them constantly? How much do you really focus on sort of solving the pain points for people or not? If it's fully top down about sort of just automating somehow, digitizing the existing bad government bureaucracy, that's not going to work. So a lot of what we have sort of learned in the practice is that digitization or making services happen digitally is also a chance to reform those services, simplify them, and so on. It goes hand in hand with the uptake of technology in that. So a lot of the effect comes from just, not just making something digital, but really using this opportunity to make the service better with the help of digital. Again, digital just being a tool in this. So if we just take a sort of example of taxes, which is very sort of, one of the first things we did in Estonia, paying taxes was such a hassle. And it was a problem that, government was not getting enough of it because it was cumbersome to get it done. Once we made it simpler, with the help of digital tools, also by simplifying the process and so forth, taxes started coming in more, and immediately we were able to do also more as a government more widely. So my point being that, if you really focus on building out services that improve people's lives in the points of pain that they have in their lives, that should work everywhere.
Absolutely. I still remember when I first, originally from Portugal, when I first moved to Estonia, every time I would go on vacation to Portugal, a week or 2 weeks, I would reserve one day that I would call the bureaucracy day. And it was just basically me going to different government offices or banks or whatever to deal with my stuff. So one day of my vacation was wasted, which was really a contrast from how things were done in Estonia. It was, like you said, you pay your taxes with 3 clicks on your mobile phone and it's done. So I think you're absolutely right. It is about changing not just into digital, but also the way the processes work. I would like to continue with you just on one point, which is about the involvement of the private sector. You mentioned that it's not just about the government services. I think it was also one of the success stories of Estonia was how the private sector was also on board with it. And early on with the digital identity, also the banks were part of that journey. So are there also some learnings from there that can be applied when talking of the African context?
I hope that they can be applied, but obviously, here sort of, other panelists, have to chip in on this. But indeed, the sort of collaboration with private sector has been a big part of our journey from a few angles. Well, first of all, in the end, from the very beginning, we started sort of collaborating with other parts of other sectors, specifically, who were trying to digitize at the same time. So, for example, how do we pooled funds together to bring connectivity around the country? We pooled funds together, and actually private sector even led on this. So government only helped to do mass trainings on digital literacy around the country. Just like João said, I mean, digital identity was again a collaboration project, both financially as well as sort of expertise-wise, between banks, telcos, and the government. So we tried to find ways that in the end, everyone's trying to go digital. It's not just the government, it's not just the public services. I mean, the whole economy can benefit from this. So there's a lot of joint and common interest, and everyone's always short of time, money, and people, right? So, we better bring the sort of bits and pieces of our resources together for the common good and common aim. In the end, that means that we build up the whole country like that. So this sort of collaboration on common goals has been one thing. But the second thing has been even more specific, that obviously we took the approach from early on that when we build up public digital services or digital government for that matter, we have relied on our private sector experts and companies and tech industry a lot for a few reasons. Well, first of all, because obviously, especially back in the day, there's no way we were able to afford the best techies, the best talent on government payroll. So we had to work with outside specialists all the way from academia to freelancers like that. And secondly, and I think it's the same also in many cases in many places in Africa. I mean, we come from the same background. We, for example, have been forced to use a lot of foreign aid just the same way, right? So and the only way to do that has not been with people on permanent staff, but rather working with contractors and outside help. So we try to really maximize the benefit we get from that. And secondly, why we've been doing this is that, so it was also the hope that, if we build up the government digitally, we also then have a spillover in terms of the economic development. So basically, we have a tech industry that grows, and that spillover has happened. So obviously, today we have this excellent, vibrant, startup and tech ecosystem with several unicorns and so forth. This is not been born just out of government going digital. There's many other aspects there as well, but it's been one contributing factor that the more we've been doing as a government, the more there's the whole sort of buzz and ecosystem around to work from. And what we have seen obviously is that these guys who have been building things for us and working and building things out with us now are taking this expertise and these solutions around the world, including to Africa. So some of the platforms like X-Road, our national data exchange platform, works beautifully in Namibia now, and it's been tried in other places. The stuff that's been done on taxes, the stuff that's been done on business registration. So trying to bring some of this reform experience also to live in different parts of Africa.
Very good. And I think you bring two very good points with that last intervention, which I think are also a very good way to try to wrap this up with giving now the word to the others, which is the private sector and how they can get involved. Also, what we're doing here with this hackathon, we have a few teams also working on e-governance as a topic, and there is opportunity out there for some startups and some collaborations to happen across Africa. So before we sign off, I want to give each of the panelists a last word, and perhaps you can use this time also to give some words of encouragement to young people who are present at the hackathon and are thinking of e-governance and are wanting to give their first steps in supporting some of these initiatives for their own countries and across Africa. So perhaps Siko, let's begin with you.
Thank you, João. Yeah, I think looking at our African context, we're the cradle of humanity and the cradle of innovation, if I can put it that way. One just has to look at North Africa and Egypt, for instance, or Ethiopia, and the innovation historical innovation that came out of there. So we're sitting at I think Africa is sitting at what you call the edge of chaos, where there's good things happening and there's the opposite. And we in this space that we have to navigate. But I think as an encouragement to the participants, I think first and foremost would be well done for being part of the solution. I think Africa needs active and engaged citizens and leaders of government. I think they must take it and make it their prerogative to listen and involve citizens and always put the needs of the people first. And I think for all those participating in the hackathon, they should just always remember Wakanda forever.
Nice. Well done. Let's go to Sarah.
Yeah, thank you very much. My parting shot will really be on private sector partnership. The governments alone do not have enough money to invest in the innovations, and 80% of digital platforms we are using, including Zoom that we are speaking on now and connecting globally, they are private sector led. So it's important for all governments to create enabling environments for private sector to establish innovation hubs, and even youth, young people to engage in innovation and creativity using technology, so that we solve 70% of unemployment crisis among the educated youth. Our governments have no capacity to absorb the educated youth in terms of jobs, but we know that technology can give everybody a job working from home, wherever we are, and we have managed to build resilience during COVID pandemic, all of us connecting and working digitally with each other and delivering on our intended outputs and outcomes as a people and as leaders in our respective capacities. We have e-commerce that is employing most of young people and the content development. So my call is to the young people to say that the future lies with technology and you are in charge of the digital revolution. I thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Nadej, very quickly, because we're running out of time, some words of encouragement.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to say in Africa, we can really have fully e-government. Of course, if I compare to Rwanda experience, I've seen that it's possible. Even when you see Mauritius, South Africa, Kenya, they are really something that you can be sure that we can have e-government. For example, now in Rwanda, we have digitized most of the services. Till now that the government has even accepted to have the e-signature. So this is just an encouragement that to see that it's possible and can happen also in Africa. My word of encouragement to the hackathon team is that we appreciate that they are being at the forefront of finding solutions that Africa is facing. We are seeing them and we appreciate them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadej. Sim, I'm so sorry we're out of time for any more words. So we need to move on to the next panel. So just, I don't know, let's give the words, if you can very quickly.
Just do it.
Just do it, perfect. Thank you, Sim, thank you, Nadej, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Siko, for this wonderful discussion. We could be here all night, very enjoyable talking to you. To everyone watching at home, stay tuned for the next panel, and for the ones hacking, keep on hacking.